Welcome back to this episode of Faith Infused Leadership. I am your co-host, Meredith Banka, here with our host, Debbie Heiser. How are you, Debbie?
I am doing fantastic. And yourself, Meredith?
Pretty well, all things considered. And I think we were just chatting before we got on today about, should we or should we not have a conversation that included the COVID virus and all of our responses to it. And I think we both felt like there wasn't a way that we could have a show that addressed topics of leadership without at least considering how COVID might be impacting us as leaders. But rather than just specifically have the conversation with COVID, we've decided that we want to have the conversation around leadership in uncharted waters. Because as a leader, this isn't the first, it's not going to be the last time that you've had to manage something that you've never seen before.
Absolutely. And part of what I love about that, Meredith, and how we came to that is, to your point, there's always internal factors that cause us to behave or lead in a certain way. And there's external factors that happen that cause us to pivot or to pause or to slow down. And as leaders do things differently. And so regardless of what that is, and you and I have seen numerous of those through our leadership career, as many other people listening have as well. And I'm sure that we will experience a whole lot more even as we go forward. So to me, it's very relevant. And thinking about how do I as a leader lead in these times? And, I go back to what I think is really the core of leadership, and that is to impact people. And in order to impact people, we have to care about those people, and not just, you and I were having this conversation, and I said, not just the robot and what can be accomplished or the task or output of that person, which I've seen a lot of focus on, and a lot of leaders and managers not knowing who their people are. And, to me, that's a little concerning, and something I immediately address with people when I'm working with businesses about how well do you know your people? And, even provide tools to say, I want you to write down, like, what are some of their favorites? What do you know about them as people? And so to me, that's kind of the overarching theme as we'll have our discussion today. And really looking at, not only that, but also as a business owner, so kind of shifting, but as a business owner and a leader of yourself and or employees, realizing that when external factors occur, that it doesn't mean our vision has to change. It's really the pivot is how we go about executing that vision. Well, and that's a concept people struggle with because they're also trying to kind of get their arms around what's happening.
And I think control comes into that. And I was going to interject there. I think that's an interesting piece of it. So let's talk first about knowing your people. So for a manager, for a leader, how can they go about getting to know their people? What are some good things, or what are even some good things to know about your people, so that when you're presented with something like this, you have the best chance to lead through it?
Yeah, I would say my number one piece of advice would be is if you're talking to an employee, ask more questions and speak less. And so any opportunity you have to interact with people, find out about them. And, some of the tools that I provided is just find out, like, do they have a family? What are their kids' names if they do? Do they have pets as their kids? What are their pets' names? When's their birthday, for crying out loud, so that you can wish them a happy birthday? What's important to them? What do they like to do on the weekend? Finding out, hey, what did you do over the weekend? Or, hey, did you spend time on Zoom with your family on Easter? Or, just sparking up conversations about themselves it just gives you so much insight, because a part of our job as a leader is to help motivate people. And part of that motivation and building confidence in people is understanding what makes them tick. And so it doesn't matter how much training I do for someone, if they don't have the confidence to do it, or they don't see the value in doing it, hence the motivation, and I can't help them see a different way or why they should be doing it, then I'm not going to get the result.
Yeah, I've heard of form, family, occupation,
Mhm.
recreation, motivation, knowing something about each of your people in each of those areas can be really helpful.
Yeah.
And what about capacity for change? How important is it to understand your team or your people's capacity for change going into a situation that's like full of lots of uncertainty?
Yeah, the reason I'm smiling really big is I think first you have to understand your own capacity for change as a leader. And it's interesting, I'm just starting to realize actually how many times I've potentially said I'm open to change, but the first initial reaction to change is no.
Mm.
And how I've been creating a mantra for myself that says it can be that simple,
Mm-hmm.
and that allow yourself time to say yes before you say no. And so, and there's different iterations of that, say no to the thing that's not 100% so I can say
Mm-hmm.
yes to the thing that is 100%. But for the most part, realizing that even when I come up to change, if it was an organizational change that came from the organization, as a leader, being able to quickly adapt and figure out, what's the good things about this change? What are the things that people are losing? Because everybody, when you go through change, immediately thinks about what they're losing.
Mm-hmm.
A great example of that right now with COVID is the graduating seniors.
Mm-hmm.
Now, don't get me wrong. I hate for them that they're missing this last part of their high school careers. And I know everybody has different high school memories. I loved high school, and, those were some really pivotal times. But immediately you saw all these negative reactions on social media about, seniors not having their last baseball game, not having their last track meet, not having prom, not having graduation, to now I'm seeing people on social media taking the class of 2020 and creating like adopt a kid kind of profiles where,
Right.
they're sending them words of encouragement and these types of things. And so again, the vision is the same, that these people feel special, but it's going about it a different way.
Mm-hmm.
And so like being able to look at and say, what is someone losing, so that we can address that and not give it power. So when you speak it and you say, yeah, it sucks that they're not going to have a graduation, but as we look at that, what are some creative ways to look at that differently? Well, I don't know about you, but sitting through 300 people graduating on stage, I don't think would be near as much fun as somebody getting a care package with, I don't like Dr. Pepper, but Dr. Pepper and Goldfish, or feeling that community outpouring. So,
Well, and you're making me think about a couple of things in what you're saying. One, understand your own capacity to change. And two, as you're preparing whatever pivot it is that needs to be prepared, remember you don't have all the answers,
right.
right? And so we've had other conversations around inclusive leadership. And I have seen leaders in a time of change become very exclusive in their decision making. So I think I probably already know your answer, but how would how would a leader want to go about, because the pace of decision making right now is heightened. So you've
Absolutely.
got to make those decisions quickly, but you want to do it from a position of inclusiveness, not exclusiveness. So ideas there.
Yeah. So I think it ranges, Meredith, on kind of the industry that you're in, the things that you're doing. I do think, just from a personal opinion, that in times of crisis, because I'm going to say this is a crisis, not just change, that people look to other people for direction versus trusting their own instinct and trusting their own gut, right? And so people struggle with that. And so leaders really emerge that can not only provide direction, but not in kind of a dictatorial type of way and saying you have to do this way, but in a way that helps them understand and see the benefit of it, but also have input. So some tools to that might be, basically the way you have a day structured, 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, goes out the window. So I'm going to use an example. My sister is some fancy name, and she'll kill me when she listens to this because I can't ever remember it. But she works for the fire department and for the ER for Huntington Hospital in Pasadena, California. So Sunday we're on a family Zoom call, and she says, I have to go because I have a 1:00 call. And she has a call every day at 1 p.m. with those critical people that are involved, because in the medical field, things are changing, by the hour sometimes. And so maintaining that really close communication is really important, because if I'm someone that's considered a part of that kind of core group that's coming together making decisions, it's important for me as a leader to understand what's happening on the front line. So if I'm in charge of, I'll use a different case. If back in an old position that I was in, if I'm in charge of the training department and I have trainers out in the US traveling, and this happened and 9/11 happens, I need to know where those people are. I need to be able to pull together a core group of people to find the people that we're not sure where they're at in transit, and make sure and touch point those people to make sure everything's okay. So from a crisis standpoint, that immediate communication is really important, and understanding that you got to drop those other things. When it's going through change, that same thing is important. It doesn't necessarily take on, we have to meet every 5 hours to, keep up on this, but it's about keeping that really open line of communication and realizing, to your point, and having that humility of a servant leader to say, I don't have all the answers, and to be authentic about it and say, you know what, I'm going through this change as well, and I'm going to try to lead you as best as I can, but I'm going to stumble too. And it's important that we all realize we're going to stumble. And so in that case, if we're a true team, we're not going to let the balls drop. They may hover really close to the floor, but somebody will come and help pick those up. And so working cohesively as a team requires that communication.
And I love that you're encouraging keeping the team informed, because at the pace of change, the pace of information that comes in a situation like this, and there will be others, there will be other things, that happen in your professional career that have this energy of change and this energy of necessity around them. Keeping everyone informed is so critical, so critical. So I'm glad to hear you encouraging that.
Yeah, and I would say too, part of that is keeping what I call an open door mentality, meaning that, because you and I both know, and I'm only going to speak for myself, when things happen and people react differently than what you typically see them react. And in this case, because everything comes to a screeching halt, it is more chaotic. There's a lot of fear energy out there. And what happens is fear eats fear, right? Like it continues to grow and get bigger and bigger and bigger, when in fact, the one thing that started the thought of fear 99% of the time is not even close to being anywhere near the truth. But then it's like the telephone game when you were a kid, and you would tell one person and it would go around the circle and it's something completely different. And so really focusing in on how you're going to communicate that information, and then how you leave it, that if people have questions, they can ask you questions for clarification, which is super important, because otherwise you have to do more damage control than you would have if you just would have taken the time to communicate. And a lot of leaders don't see that. But it goes back to, I think, something we talked about in a different one, where people, they want the short-term fix. We don't think long-term. Like I see everybody going crazy about the stock market, and it's like, okay, yeah, I lost a ton of money, but guess what? I just made it all back in another $5,000, and that's the volatility. It goes back and forth. But the point being is that, all this panic happened. And so it creates negativity. And then as it evens out, then that negativity evens out, and hopefully the positive takes over. I don't know if any of that just made sense, but it did to my brain.
Completely. I mean, it's that maintaining clarity, maintaining presence, and I think in knowing our people, when we're managing through these uncharted waters and we're keeping them informed, it puts us in the best available position to be able to ask of them things that we might not normally have to ask.
Absolutely. And I think too, Meredith, I'm even thinking about my clients. I'm not necessarily managing people, but I am leading people as a coach. And one of the things that over this last month that we've really been focusing on is pivoting. So there are some businesses that, have closed or been on furlough because of what's happening. So how can they pivot and still live out their mission and their vision, but in a different way? So we've been working on that. But now also I've been asking clients, and so if I have clients listening to this that we haven't met yet this week, this is coming out, but to really go back and revisit that vision and revisit the whys behind what they do, because that will help them continue to pivot and potentially take their businesses in a little different way than what they thought it would go. And the same holds true if you're leading people. Re-looking at, why are you leading people? And what is it? It's not the title, it's not the money. I mean, those are great things that come with it, but if that's the reason being, then you're going to drown when it comes to change and chaos that happens.
Absolutely. So any final thoughts on helping leaders when they're managing through crisis or significant times of change?
Yeah, I would say schedule time in your schedule for interruption, because people need some reassurance. They need to talk about family matters. They need to talk about some of the things that are happening. There are a lot of shifts, particularly with this COVID, so many people working at home, but then being expected to be teachers along with that, since kids aren't in school. And then also, all of the things that come with that. And so individual people are going through an immense amount of change, and I call it surfing the edge of chaos. And then as organizations, we're having that happen. And so you'll have to listen into the next podcast as I talk about the 4 stages of development. But what's happening is all of these different stages, whether it be you personally, your family unit, your community, and the world, are all going through mass amount of change right now. And we'll see some great things from it, and there will be some damage from it. That's just the law of polarity. But my statement, or my one piece of advice, is to allow for opportunity for people to be able to talk to you, and not just about the outcome or the bottom line, because whatever they're going to talk to you about will impact that bottom line. And it's your choice as a leader, whether that's a positive or negative impact.
That's awesome. So if someone wanted to learn a little bit more about the coaching work that you do, or find out a little bit more about you, where would be a good place for them to go?
Yeah, I'm going to send you to a couple of places. Go out and follow me on Facebook at 3 Vines Consulting. And then you can also find more information about how I work with businesses and individuals out on www.3vconsulting.com. And I look forward to chatting with you in a couple weeks.
Awesome. Well, it's been great having you here again, Debbie. I always love our time together. So for this episode of Faith Infused Leadership, I'm your co-host, Meredith Benka, here with your host, Debbie Heiser, and we will see you all the next time.
Bye, everybody.